Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a lunch hour talk by the Center for Chinese Studies at Rutgers University. Today we have my colleague, a sociologist at Rutgers, Professor Lei Lei, who's going to give a talk on a very interesting topic, the kind of topic that the center usually doesn't quite sponsor because it's not strictly a China related topic, but it's still a very much an interesting topic. And she has published an article on it, joint authored, and has garnered a lot of attention. The title of the paper and the talk is "Why Are Fewer Young Adults Having Casual Sex?" Professor Lei Lei.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to present my research. So this is actually a study of young adults in the US rather than China. So I'm a sociologist. My research interests are family behaviors, life course transitions, and also health of adults in both US, China, and India. So this study is related to my work on how the life course have changed over generations, right? Especially during the young adulthood stage. So we have been studying the timing when young adults leave their parental home and whether they ever return back to their parents' home. So we have found that in recent years, American young adults tend to stay with their parents for a longer period. And after they establish independent living, as high as 40% of young adults eventually go back to their parental home. Right? So parents actually provides longer periods of support, both economically and socially, to young adults. And then we moved on to looked at other life course transitions for young adults. So sexual behavior is one of our focus. So this paper explores why are fewer young adults having casual sex in recent years. Right? So there has been a general trend that sexual activities among young adults have been declining in recent years. Right? So this is general sexual activities, not casual sex. Statistics show that the percentage of adults ages 20 to 24 who did not have sex in the past year increased from 11.7% in 2002 to 2009 to 15% in 2010 to 2014. And another paper found out that the percentage of sexually inactive men, ages from 18 to 24, increased from 19% in 2000 to 2002 to 30% in 2016 to 18. And the percentage of sexually inactive young women increased from 15 to 19% over the same period. So among the adults in the US in general, the frequency of sexual activities have been declining, but the decline has been more acute among young adults. So people may be surprised by these trends, right? Because nowadays our culture is more open towards sexual activities, and young adults may be using social networking softwares like Tinder and other to find potential sexual partners. But why sexual activities has been declining most severely among young adults, right? So there is lots of speculation by journalists and by other scholars. So there has been articles discussing why young people are having less sex, and they have proposed various reasons why young people are having less sex, right? So people have suggested maybe it is economic insecurity, maybe it's increasing usage of the social media that distract young people from interpersonal relationship, right? And other people also propose that maybe it's parental pressure during high school and college. So parents always want want their children to focus on their curriculum and academics, right, rather than starting a romantic relationship. And other scholars mentioned the psychological distress. That could be one reason why young people are involved less in sexual behaviors. But actually, there's no scientific studies, right, that use the empirical data to test these hypotheses. That's why we used the recent data of a representative sample of US young adults to actually examine why sexual behavior among the single young adults have declined in recent years. So that's the goal of our study. So in this study, we actually focus on casual sex. So we define casual sex as sexual activities that occur outside of a committed relationship or partnership. The encounters that here we refer as casual sex. So casual sex could involve people who are strangers or acquaintances or previous partners or friends. So it could be so some young adults actually treat it as a trial or rehearsal for a long-term romantic relationship. So casual sex, the trends or the changes in casual sex could have both positive and negative consequences for young adults themselves and for the broader society. So for instance, a declining frequency of casual sex actually can result in fewer unwanted pregnancies, fewer sexually transmitted diseases, and fewer mental health problems among young adults. However, the sexual inactivity may hinder young adults' psychological development and diminish their physical and emotional gratification. So here are some conceptual explanation of casual sex and how we define casual sex. So next, the current study. So in this study, we aim to identify reasons that for the decline in the frequency with young adults who are not in a romantic relationship report having had recent sexual intercourse. So we use data from the panel study of income dynamics, transition into adulthood supplement survey, right, for the period of 2007 to 2017. So I will introduce the data later on. So there are two goals of this study. So the first goal is that we actually document a decline in the percentage of young adults who report having had recent sexual intercourse without having been in a romantic relationship. And the second, we then perform formal mediation analysis to isolate or to identify the factors that explain this downward trend. So first, let me go over the theoretical framework for this study. So actually, we use the theory of emerging adulthood. So in this theory, the authors who proposed this theory explain that owing to an expansion of educational opportunities and various cultural change, young adults are postponing their adoption of roles that typically mark the transition to adulthood. So the markers for adulthood actually includes marriage, childbearing, independent living, that means moving out of parental home, completing education, and entering the labor market. So the current generation of young adults actually delaying their transition into these adult roles compared to previous generations. So the lower frequency of sexual activity could be part of this general transition, right? Because sexual activity could be another marker for the transition into adulthood. The young adults today just delay their adoption of this new role, right? So there are critical changes in young adults' lives, right, which could explain their delayed transition into young adulthood. and their lower engagement in sexual activities. So first, we propose that maybe the increasing financial uncertainty could explain the declining trend in casual sex. So because people with fewer economic resources may be less attractive as a sexual partner, and they are less able to dine in a restaurant and attend bars, so which lower their opportunity to meet potential sex partners, right? And if young people are struggling economically, they may work multiple jobs, right? So this limits their time available for casual sex. And many young adults now are also burdened with student debt and personal debt. So this kind of economic distress could may explain their decreasing trend in casual sex. So that's the first mechanism we propose. And the second mechanism could be the increasing trend of co-residence with parents. So young adults who live with parents tend to have fewer opportunities for casual sex because their behaviors are monitored by parents, and they may find it's more inconvenient for them to bring their sexual partners at home to their home. And studies have found that in recent years, young adults tend to live with their parents for a longer period, and higher percentage of young adults actually return home after they have lived independently. So this increasing trend of co-residence with parents may help to explain the declining trend in casual sex. And the third mechanism is the increasing use of electronic media, right? So some researchers suggest that young adults may substitute video gaming for opposite-sex interpersonal relationships. So the video game or computer game may be an alternative source of gratification, right, for young adults. So interpersonal relationship may become less attractive because there are so much fun things to do on social media, and there are so much game to play, both online and on your phones, right? And the electronic media communication may limit the needs or desire for face-to-face interactions. So although teenagers and young adults engage more through social media and online, but that tends to distract them from face-to-face interactions. So the increasing using of electronic media may help to explain the declining trend in casual sex. Okay, and the last mechanism we propose is alcohol consumption. So it is well known that alcohol actually has a disinhibiting effect. So alcohol consumption and sex often comes simultaneously. So like binge drinking and partying may provide opportunities for young adults to meet potential sex partners. However, in recent years, studies have found that young adults tend to consume less alcohol, including binge drinking. So there has been a declining trend in alcohol consumption among young adults. So this may help to explain the decreasing trend in casual sex as well. So these are the explanatory factors that we're going to test in this study. So here are the data and methods we use. So we use the data from the 2007 to 2017 waves of the transition into adulthood supplement of the panel study of income dynamics. So the PSID is actually collects data on a representative sample of the US families since 1986. It has been over 50 years. So the survey follows a representative sample of US families over time. And in 2005, the PSID started to institute the TAS study, the transition to adulthood, in order to collect the data on young adults aged 18 to 26. So they have been following young adults every 2 years. So they interview the young adults every 2 years since 2005. In this study, we select the PSID TA respondents who are between age 18 to 23 and use the data collected in 2007, 2009, 2013, 15, and 17. So we omit the data in 2005 because there were no question about sexual activities asked in that year. And the data in 2011 has some mistake, which makes the data unuseful. And in our analysis, we select only respondents who are not in a romantic relationship, right? That means who are not married, not cohabiting, and not in a dating relationship. So only single young adults who are not in a romantic relationship. So our sample consists of 945 women and 1,040 men. But each individual can be observed multiple times because this is a longitudinal data tracking the same individual over time. Okay, so now let me go over our variables, right? So the dependent variable for this study is sexual behavior, of course. So among these single young adults, the survey asks them whether they had engaged in any sexual intercourse in the past 4 weeks. So that's sexual activity in the past month. Right? However, the survey did not define what sexual intercourse is. So it's up to the respondent's own interpretation of sexual intercourse. And the answer is yes or no. So they reported whether they had sexual intercourse in the past 4 months, in the past 4 weeks, I'm sorry. So that's the dependent variable. And here are our explanatory variables. So here are all the factors that we use to explain the time trend in the changes in sexual activity. Right? So we measure the respondents' economic situations using their employment status, their earnings in the past year, and their debt loads, right? So whether they had, so the total amount of student loan, personal loan, and credit card loan. So we have standardized the earnings and loans using 2007 dollars. So these variables are measured in each of the survey waves. Right? And next, we measure their coincidence with parents. So this variable is a binary variable. It is coded 1 when the respondents actually lived with the parents at time t. And we measure their computer gaming behavior. So this is the frequency of using internet for games in the past 12 months preceding the time of the interview. So the variable is measured from 1 to 5, which means never to every day. And next, we measure their internet use. So this is the average frequency of using internet for email, school-related projects, shopping, visiting social networking website in the 12 months preceding the time of the interview. Each of the item is scaled from never to every day, right, which is coded from 1 to 5, and standardized before averaging across the 5 items. Next, we measure the television watching. So this is the frequency of watching non-news TV in the 12 months preceding the time of the interview. So it also ranges from 1 to 6. So that means less than once a month to every day. And finally, the drinking behavior. It measures the frequency of alcohol consumption in the year preceding the time of the interview. So it is measured from 1 to 7. That means never to every day. And we will test whether each of these factors help to explain the declining trend in sexual activity. Okay. And at the same time, we also control for various of individual characteristics like race, the time, young adults' age, college enrollment status, self-rated health, religious attendance, parental household structure, and parental education measured when the respondents were 18 years old. Okay, so now let's see some statistics. Okay, so to show the trends or the changes in their behaviors over time, we have presented the statistics in 2007 and the statistic in 2017. So first, let's look at their sexual behaviors. So we have separated the analysis for young women and young men. So the first panel here is for young women. First, so this is their reporting of having had recent casual sex. Right? So for young women in 2007, 31% of them had sex in the past month. But in 2017, only 22% of them had sex in the past month. So it has been declining for young women. And for young men, the percentage of having had casual sex declined from 38% to 24% over the 10 years. Okay. And we also present how their economic activity, correspondence with parents, and other behaviors have changed over the 10 years. Okay. So let's look at young women first. So for young women, their economic situation have actually improved a little bit. It has not been declining. So more young women tend to be employed over time, and their debt load has declined over time. And next, for parental correspondence, higher percentage of young women tend to live with parents, living with parents over the 10 years. So it's changed from 44% to 50% of young women living in the parental home. And for computer games, young women play computer games more frequently over time. So it has increased from 2.2 to 3.1 speed. And internet use has also increased over time. So this is the average frequency of internet use. And television watching has been decreased slightly, but not significant. And drinking behavior, so over time, young women drink less frequently. So the frequency has declined from 2.6 to 2.47. Okay. And next, let's look at the changes for young men. So for young men, their economic situation has not changed over time. So because if I do not put any stars here, that means there's no significant change in their economic behaviors, economic situations over time. Right? So employment rate, earnings, and debts do not change over time. And the parental correspondence has increased for young men as well over the 10 years. So it increased from 54% to 62% over time. And computer gaming has increased significantly. So the frequency has changed from 2.6 to 3.5. And internet use has increased over time. And television watching has decreased significantly, and the drinking frequency has decreased over time. So the trend of the behavioral change has been quite similar for young men and young women, right? Except that for young men, the economic situation have not changed over time. Okay, and next we examine how the changes in these factors help to explain the time trend in casual sex. Okay, so this is our regression table. Just to point out that the effect of year here, right, it shows the time trend, because we collected data, we used the data from 2007, 2009, 2013, 15, and 17. So the effect of the year on the outcome of sexual frequency shows the time trend, right? So the year variable has a negative effect, That means over time, the frequency of sexual activity among the single young adults, so this is a table for young women, among the single young women has declined. Right? And in the subsequent models, we include all these different factors we are examining. Right? So after we include these factors, we will examine how the effect of year, right, or the effect of time changes across the models. Right? And in this table, I would like to point out the effect of some of these factors on their on the frequency of sexual activity. Right? So for young women, we find that earnings has a positive relationship with sexual frequency. If you see the coefficient for that variable is positive, that means a positive relationship. So young women with higher earnings tend to have casual sex more frequently. And that load does not have an effect. And the parental residence has a negative relationship with casual sex. So young women who live with parents tend to have less casual sex compared to women who live independently. And computer game does not affect the sexual activity among young women. And next, internet use actually has a positive relationship with sexual activity among young women. So young women who use internet more frequently tend to have more casual sex. And the TV watching does not have an effect. And finally, drinking frequency is positively associated with casual sex. So women who drink more frequently tend to have more casual sex. Okay. And the next table actually shows how much of the time effect or the time trend is explained by each of these explanatory variables. Right? So the percentage here shows how much of the time effect, time trend, right, explained by each of these factors. Okay? So employment and earning explain only a little bit, and it is not statistically significant. Right? If this row has a star, that means the amount of time effect explained by this factor is statistically significant. Right? So actually, for young women, right, drinking, the decline in the frequency of drinking explained the highest amount of the time trend. So almost 24% of the declining in casual sex has been explained by the declining frequency in drinking behavior. Okay. So that's our finding for young women. And the internet use actually has the opposite effect, right, as what we expected. Because as you can see, internet use is positively related to casual sex. And over time, young women tend to use the internet more frequently. So a negative percentage here means that the decline in casual sex would have been much larger, right, if there is no increase in internet use. Right? So without the increase in internet use, the decline in casual sex would have been sharper or even more steeper. So actually only one factor helped to explain the changing casual sex among young women, that is drinking behavior. But among young men, the story is a little bit different. Right? So first, let's look at what factors affect young men's sexual activity. Right? So first, we see that employment and earning do not have an effect. And debt load actually has a positive relationship with young men's sexual activity, but we are not sure how to interpret that. And parental co-residence has a negative effect. That means young men who live with parents tend to have less casual sex. Right? That's understandable. And computer gaming has a significant negative impact on young men's sexual behavior. So people who play computer games more frequently tend to have less casual sex. Right? And internet use and TV watching do not have an effect on men's sexual activity. and the drinking behavior is positively associated with casual sex. Okay, and the next table summarizes what percentage of the effect has been explained by these factors. Right? So among young men, there are three major factors help to explain the decline in casual sex. So the increasing trend in parental coexistence, the more frequent computer gaming, and the less frequent drinking, right, all help to explain a significant amount of the decline in casual sex, right? And in general, all these three factors altogether explain almost 60% of the decline in the casual sex among young men. So that's all of our findings. Okay. And to summarize our findings, so this is a conclusion that we draw from the analysis. Young adolescents and young adults are increasingly less likely to have sexual intercourse outside of a romantic relationship. So that means their casual sex has been declining between 2007 and 2017, as our data showed. The decline in alcohol consumption is actually the only factor that explains a significant portion of the decline for young women's probability of engaging in casual sex. And for young men, the increase in the frequency of playing computer games, the tendency to reside in the parental home, and the decline in drinking all played an important role. And the trends in young adults' financial insecurity, including their student debts, do not appear to underlie the change in their casual sex activity. So that's a summary of our findings. So finally, we would like to offer some discussion of these findings and conclusions. So it could be that the growing individualism and the reduced sociability that might lead to less partying and less drinking and more computer game and less autonomous living among young adults in recent years. And however, it is quite difficult to measure the cultural change. It requires qualitative studies to actually talk to the young adults and see why their behaviors have changed over time. And there are some limitations in our measures and our analysis. So our studies does not distinguish different types of casual sex. For instance, the hooking up among college students could be a special type of casual sex. And we cannot measure whether the hooking up among college students have changed over time. And our measure of casual sex could be inaccurate because first, sexual activity is not defined in the data, and we also cannot measure the casual sex engaged by people who are currently in a relationship, right? So we cannot measure out of relationship sexual activity. And there is an unexplained part of the declining casual sex among young women. So in our analysis, we are only able to explain about 25% of the decline among young women. So future research actually needs to identify other explanations for the decline among young women. And another possible explanation for this decline could be that the Me Too movement make young people more concerned with sexual violence and coercion. So especially young women, they may become less likely to engage in casual sex. And finally, I would like to hear from the audience, maybe what is your experience and what do you expect the impact of COVID on young adults' sexual activity and other family behaviors. Thank you, that's all of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can turn off the slides so then we can.
So I will unshare.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the floor is open. Anybody has question, you can, since we don't have tons of people, so feel free to just unmute yourself and raise the question. If we have too many people, then we can line. So if people are not are still thinking about the question, let me just get it started. I actually have a bit of a meta question about the kind of the disciplinary norm, right? It's, you know, since I'm not a sociologist, so which you were when I was introducing you, and then when you were saying that it's that the project was actually based on US sort of data set, right? But what's interesting is that when I was trying to sort of put the information on the website, I couldn't find sort of the description of saying this is actually referring to US. I really have to dig into the sort of the data itself and to say that it's, oh, this is actually US based data, rather than saying, because just looking at the topic itself, why fewer young adults having casual sex, it could have been anywhere, right? It could have been, let's say, in China, you know, so or whatever. And so that's really interesting to me, because assuming that if you were to do analysis about any other place, then the country would be very much sort of in the description, right? And I thought that was very interesting. I don't know whether that's because, you know, that's just the way people practice. If it's in the US, and then if this is US, you know, sort of magazine and you know, journal and so forth, and then that's just the way it is. Or, you know, there's something more sort of normative in the way that, you know, some of these sort of analysis is assumed.
Yeah. I think we first, I admit, I think we should have put the country's name in the title. I think that's a much better practice. But I think, I don't know, I think in the US, the sociology discipline, I don't know, people, if you conduct a study and publish in a US journal, because like the field is kind of a little bit dominated by US-based studies. And if you are conducting the study in the US, and you do not need to justify why you select this research site, and you do not need to introduce too much of the background for the research, or for the, like, you do not need to introduce the social setting, the cultural environment, such and such. But I definitely agree. I don't know. It's like studying any other places, like it's like more marginalized than the study in the US, because there are so much. The majority of the studies produced is about the US, and if you're, I don't know, publishing in a US journal, the editor or the reviewer may not ask you to like identify the site of study in the title or in the abstract.
Right, because the US, you know, academia has so much influence over the world. So then whatever published here becomes almost normative, you know. It becomes like, okay, this is the young people, but well, this is just the young people in the US, you know, and a particular kind of class, particular kind of orientation, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I thought that was and when I thought about it, was that, oh, that's actually interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. So, any other question? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Or you can type in the chat.
Yeah, you can.
If you do not want to speak.
Yeah, you can always type in the chat. Do you have any, you know, sort of hypothesis about why the debt level of young men actually, you know, in the way that it correlates with their with the decline in their in you know, their casual sexual activity? Because you said you don't
yeah,
study doesn't like, know quite how to deal with that.
Unexpected.
Yeah,
I think that may be related to their economic situation, because like most of the people who have a debt is from the student's loan, right? Maybe for people who have student loan, those are college graduates. So they may have a better economic status compared to people who do not have student loan.
I see. So you're saying that the fact
of
having student loan actually is indicative of a better socioeconomic status.
Yeah, that could be the case.
Yeah.
And it could also be that they are a little bit older than other respondents, because although we are looking at age 18 to 23, and actually in the most recent years, the amount of student loan has been declining. So it already passed the peak for borrowing student loan. So the slightly younger adults may have like less student loan than the older young adults.
I see. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So yeah, so the Yang He has a question. How did you decide to include certain explanatory factors? So because he said he's not familiar with quantitative studies.
Okay. Yeah, I think we select the explanatory factors based on both the theory and the availability of data, right? So we started from theoretical speculations, right? We think about, we based on our theoretical framework, and also we used the past evidence, like past studies, right? We looked at previous studies and see what factors are related to sexual behavior, right? What are the predictors of sexual behavior, and what has been changed for young adults in recent years. So there has been studies showing the frequency of drinking have declined, and it also widely know that drinking behavior is associated with sexual activity, right? So that's why we think this could be a candidate for explaining the declining trend in sexual behavior. And luckily, we have this quite rich data set that have measures of many different behaviors among young adults. So we can measure their use of internet, computer gaming, drinking, and also correspondence with parents, employment, debts, all kinds of things. Yeah, and in the theory, people also proposed other factors like the access to pornography online, right? But we don't have a measure on that, so that we cannot examine that factor.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have another question. So when you were doing when you do this on the survey itself, when it says, let's say 07 versus 17, it said, for the prior 4 weeks, whether you engage in casual sexual intercourse, does it matter what time of the year it was, or is it always the same? Because I imagine summer, this would be different from like winter, right? That would be if that. I don't know whether that's factored into the way the survey is conducted, or it's just random.
Yeah, I think the time of the year definitely matters, but we did not control for that. Like I think when they collect the data, since in each year they would interview like a few hundreds of young adults. So the interview actually spans from the October in the first year until April in the next year. So it spans for several months. Yeah, of course, I think the month of the year would definitely matter for sexual behavior. Actually, I have studied, I don't remember exactly, I think I have studied the Google trend for the search of certain terms, which actually shows the sexual behaviors is the highest amount during spring break. I think that's the. I think that's the.
Yeah, just look at Miami.
Yeah, in summertime and spring break is definitely higher than during the semester.
Right. Yeah. So that's So the timing.
Yeah, maybe if we put in indicators of months into the model, we may find a pattern.
right. I mean, at least it's always the same time of the year.
Yeah, it's always yes. Each survey is always the same time.
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah, so our results won't be affected by
By that. Okay.
the survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other question?
Yeah, I would also like to hear your experience or expectation about like how COVID would affect young adults' dating behavior or personal life or sexual behavior. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, other than the sort of the expected, consequence of not people not meeting up or it is significantly inhibited
and
for these kinds of things. I wonder whether there might actually be surprises.
Yeah, and also like after the COVID, after we return to normal, whether young people's behavior would change. Like during this year, of course, we lived a confined life where it is restricted. But maybe after we return to normalcy, how young people's behavior would change, or not.
Well, not just young people, or probably everybody's behavior. A lot of people, even in economic activities, a lot of sort of people are saying that people are going to spend like crazy. Maybe people would also engage in all kinds of crazy activities to make up for the lost time. Who knows?
Yeah,
it would be interesting to study, whether there's going to be any survey on those things. Actually really interesting.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about how like the behavior of Chinese young people would be different from the behavior of American young adults.
That would.
Like, what is the trend like in China? I don't have the data, but I'm searching.
Right. I think that would be a really interesting. I mean, they have a lot of the baseline assumption will probably be very different. Yeah. So that would okay. So Katie has a question. So I feel like since quarantine, online sex, for lack of a better word, such as OnlyFans, etc., has become much more popular, but I don't really hear about people actually meeting up in person. Right? Yeah. So then there's who knows that there's So but human beings are creative beings, so especially coming having to do with something as primal as sexual activities. Yeah. So anyways, do we have any last minute question? All right. If not, well, let's thank Lei Lei for this very interesting talk, and then we'll hope to see you back in another occasion. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.